Thank you for joining us this evening, everyone. My name is Terry Moore, and I am the Executive Director of the Decatur Prevention Initiative. We are a nonprofit organization that has provided substance abuse prevention and mental health promotion in Decatur since 1992. As one of the founding members of the Decatur Parents Network, and on behalf of the network leadership team, I would like to welcome all of our members and friends who are with us virtually, or who will be maybe watching the recording, because this will be on YouTube. Now, a little bit about the Decatur Parents Network. Concerned parents and organizations formed the network back in 2016 to help families support each other and to help all our youth make healthier decisions and to avoid risky behaviors. If you're not currently a member, please consider visiting our website at decaturparents.net, and I know Tiffany's going to put that in the chat room, and join us as a pledge member, as a friend, or as a friend. There is no charge to join, by the way. We don't have membership dues. The network not only provides information and opportunities to connect with other parents, but our members have also proven to be a great support to each other when hard times happen. And I can't say enough about that, just personally being on the leadership team and some of the ways the parents in this network have supported me. Please know that we support our members even after their children finish high school. Even when they walk across that stage, they don't walk out of your life. So you will see more programming on that in the coming months. Most of our speaker series are recorded and uploaded onto our website and our YouTube channel, along with any resources that were shared that evening. So if you miss out on something or you're calling in, don't worry, they will be uploaded to YouTube as quick as we can get to it. We are a volunteer group. Please plan to join us again on September the 29th as we explore the science of addiction recovery to celebrate Recovery Month as well. Tonight's session is a direct result of parent feedback gathered through a recent community survey and feedback from our previous sessions. 71% of those surveyed indicated that they wanted us to dive further into mental health issues, and many of them mentioned being concerned about teen suicide. Your input at the end of each session will help guide us as we plan future events. There will be a 3-question survey when you leave the Zoom room tonight. Please take a moment to complete that. That helps us decide which direction to go in, and it also keeps some of our grant funders happy. This week is National Suicide Prevention Week. Tonight's topic is teen suicide, prevention and intervention. This presentation is not about any specific incident, although our community, like many others, has had our share of tragedies. Some here tonight may be directly impacted by the suicide of someone you know or love. Please note that we're keeping that helpline number up for anyone who may need them, and additional resources for help and support will also be shared. For instance, I know the Student Center referral form will be shared there that you can fill out immediately. The panel tonight focuses on prevention and intervention with 2 local experts. Many suicide preventionists believe that approximately 81% of those who are suicidal tell someone that they are planning on doing this and when they are planning it. And I know that that number just, even though I've been doing this stuff a long time, that number just tore at my heart. We are asking you to join us in being able to talk about this tough topic tonight and explore ways to prevent suicides. This event is being recorded and will be shared on our YouTube channel as soon as possible. Questions and comments will be held until after the second panelist. We want to share a short video produced by the Mayo Clinic that reflects a youth perspective to introduce the topic. Tiffany, if you can roll them.
I have my ups and downs, just like anybody else.
Maybe more than anybody else.
I can be hard to figure out.
And I like my privacy.
I don't want you looking over my shoulder all the time.
But you know your kid better than anybody else. And if you think he's acting different than usual...
Acting really down, crying all the time for no good reason.
Or getting really mad, not able to sleep, Or sleeping too much.
shutting her friends out, or giving her stuff away.
Acting reckless, drinking, using drugs, staying out late.
Suddenly not doing stuff he used to love.
Or doing stuff that's just not like him.
It might be nothing to worry about. It might just be high school.
Or it might be something more. He might be depressed.
Not just feeling down, really depressed.
It might be that your kid is thinking about killing himself.
It happens. More than you think. More than it should.
And people say, I had no idea.
I thought it was just a phase he was going through.
I never thought she'd do it.
I wish he'd come to me.
I wish he'd said
I
something.
wish I'd said something.
When it's too late. So if you think your kid's acting different, if she seems like a different person, say something.
Say, what's wrong? How can I help?
And ask straight out, are you thinking about killing yourself?
It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, it helps.
When people are thinking about killing themselves, they want somebody to ask.
They want somebody to care.
Maybe you're afraid you'll make it worse if you ask. Like, you'll put the idea in their head.
Believe me, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't hurt to ask.
In fact, the best way to keep a teenager from killing herself is to ask, are you thinking about killing yourself?
And what if they say yes?
Or maybe.
Or sometimes,
Well, here's what you don't say.
That's crazy.
Don't be such a drama queen.
you're making too much of this.
That boy's not worth killing
Yourself.
over.
That's not going to solve anything.
You're just trying to get attention.
You're not going to kill yourself.
What you do say is,
I'm sorry you're feeling so bad.
How can I help?
We'll get through this together.
Let's keep you safe.
A lot of people think about killing themselves, adults and kids.
most of them never try it, but some of them do. So if your kid says,
I'd be better off dead.
I can't live with
I'm
this.
gonna kill myself,
Take her seriously. Find someone she can talk to about it. Someone who knows how to help.
Sometimes kids want to kill themselves because something happened. A breakup, a failure.
But sometimes it goes deeper, and it's not going to go away by itself.
Get some help. Talk to your doctor.
Or a counselor at school.
Or your minister.
but don't just let it drop.
And make sure that your kid always has someone to turn to. Someone he trusts.
Make a list together right then. 3, 4, 5 names.
Put a suicide hotline number on there too.
Have him keep that list in his wallet, so he always knows where to turn.
Make sure your home is safe.
If you have pills she could use to hurt herself, lock them up.
If you have a gun, don't just lock it up. Get it out of the house. The bullets too.
And one more thing. If you think your kid might be about to hurt himself, don't leave him alone.
Take him to the emergency room.
Call 911 if you have to.
We all have our ups and downs, but sometimes it's more than that.
If you think something's wrong, the only way to find out is to ask.
Ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
Don't wait until you're sure. Trust your gut.
Because it never hurts to ask.
And it can make a big difference.
All the difference.
In your kid's life.
We are fortunate tonight to have two very patient professionals to help guide us through this conversation. The first segment will focus more on signs and symptoms, how to respond, and seeking help. Our second segment will address what happens when this happens at school or the school staff are notified of a concern. Please know that as more in-depth training is made available in the community, we will push that out to our mailing list and contacts, because I do know that there are some plans to do some more in-depth training. And it has been one of those weeks, folks. I just have to tell y'all, for those who know me. And unfortunately, our first scheduled panelist had an unavoidable conflict and is unable to be with us tonight. Now, those of you who are Marnie fans like me, I know, oh, Marnie, but I will tell you guys, you are not going to be disappointed in our next panelist. Sarah Melito presented for us last month and was a perfect choice to lead this part of our evening. In fact, she, like Marnie, has also been trained in the program that the city schools is utilizing to address suicide, and that is applied suicide intervention skills training. And I'm sure that Dr. Jones will share more about that aspect of what the schools are doing later this evening. Sarah Melito received her Master's of Science degree in Clinical Mental Health Counseling at Georgia State University and is a licensed associate professional counselor in Roswell, Georgia. She specializes in LGBTQIA+ youth and assists adolescents and their families in building a strong sense of confidence and identity within themselves. In addition to her work with youth and families, she also works with younger children and adults while also working towards her registered play therapist certification. DPI also has plans for Sarah to offer an evidence-based prevention program to some of our students this year. So we know that you're going to be seeing more of Sarah. Thank you, Sarah, for being here, and thanks for always being just willing to step up with us. We do appreciate that.
Always. DPI has a special place in my heart. Thank you, Terry, for that introduction. Welcome, everybody. So like Terry had said, I'm going to give a brief intro into what suicide looks like in your adolescent, different things to be looking out for, as well as almost even more importantly, how to respond when you are either questioning, assuming, or you know for certain that your teen is having thoughts of suicide, or at the very least engaging in self-harming behaviors as well. And so some of these seem pretty basic, right? So obviously, if you discover that your child is looking for ways to harm themselves, to kill themselves, you're finding things maybe on their phone, on their computer, depending on what access you have to, that is an immediate warning sign for sure. But some things are not as obvious as we would like them to be. Sleeping too much or too little, withdrawing or feeling isolated. You know your child better than anybody. Any deviation in behavior that seems completely unlike your child could be a cause to ask, at the very least, are you feeling depressed? Are you feeling low or down or sad? And then offering that as an invitation to start a conversation about suicide. What we also see with teens too is sometimes an increase in sarcasm and humor. I've been seeing this a lot in my teenagers who are actively suicidal at my practice, where they will engage in sarcastic and cynical types of conversations with each other, even with mom and dad, depending on how close you are with your teen. This could look like, oh, I just want to die right now. And then, just kidding right afterwards, or making jokes about, geez, I'm just gonna kill myself. It can sound like they're just being maybe dramatic, or they're just trying to be funny, although it's not. However, I've seen a rise in using sarcasm and humor as a way to kind of mask and hide suicidal ideation, while also trying to, at the same time, let mom and dad know, I am feeling this way. This is what I want to do. I do want to complete a suicide. Some other things that we're looking out for is increased anxiety, increased mood swings, increased hyperactivity, especially for our younger kids. For our children who are under the age of 12 and 11, I can also offer more information to parents on here who are looking for information on suicidality in younger children as well. I won't focus on it so much right now, but hyperactivity is a massive part to look for in changes in behavior. Our children, and I talked about this for those of you who joined us last month for the webinar I was invited to for DPI. I talked a little bit about brain development then. The prefrontal cortex is really important for all of our brain development. It's one of the last parts of our brain that develops, and is the main source in our brain that regulates mood and personality, and being able to make complex decisions. So those right or wrong decisions, being able to make split-second decisions about choice behavior. That part of our brain is not developed until we're about 30. And so our teens and our adolescents are really lacking their ability to make concrete, strong decisions, which is why suicide and self-harming behaviors can be so easily seen amongst them. Because of that, we don't always know when our teens are just having a rough time or when they are actually considering completing a suicide. And the most important part of both prevention and intervention of a suicide is communication. And that is my next part that I want to transition into, is how you at home, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa, even siblings, older siblings, can be able to intervene and prevent a suicide when you start to question if your teenager is experiencing thoughts of suicide. The the 4 A's is what I call them. These are mine. I created them. So if you don't like them, you can completely blame me for them. I didn't borrow them from anyone else. But the first A's is ask and allow. The very first thing that you want to do if you are thinking that your teen is suicidal is to ask, and not to beat around the bush. A lot of my parents will say, are you thinking about doing something? Are you having a hard time? Are you struggling? These are great questions, but they're also vague questions. And when we're talking about suicidality, we want to be very blunt, very direct. So asking your teenager, do you want to complete a suicide? Do you want to die? Are you having thoughts of hurting yourself? Have you looked up ways to kill yourself? These are hard questions to ask, and I know that, but they are the most important questions to ask, because what the literature shows us is that when you ask somebody if they want to complete a suicide, they will tell you. That is what we've seen in research over and over again, that when that door is open, that individuals will take it, including our teenagers. They will let you know, even if they're afraid of the consequences of that. When we're talking about ask, those are the questions that we want to ask. When we're talking about allow, your job in that situation, mom and dad, is to allow your teen to respond honestly and openly. This is going to require a lot of empathy. This is going to require a lot of sitting back and hearing hard things. Your teenager might decide to tell you why they want to die. They might tell you why they're feeling the way that they're feeling. And that's hard for any parent to hear, but it is also incredibly necessary to sit back and listen to it. Which leads me into the next A, which is avoid. What we want to avoid when our teenager is telling us, yes, mom, I'm having thoughts of completing a suicide. I'm having thoughts of killing myself. This is how I'm thinking about doing it. The first thing we want to avoid is saying, no, don't do that. Or here are all the reasons that you have to live for, or trying to convince them otherwise. Although that we know that you're meaning well in this, and that is definitely the first thought that all of us have when anyone tells us that they're having thoughts of completing a suicide. What this does is that this invalidates the experience that your teenager is having. It is communicating unintentionally that these thoughts are not okay. They're not allowed. We can't have these thoughts. And what we know for suicide prevention is the best way to prevent a suicide is to allow open dialogue about suicide, is to allow completely and honestly to let our children be able to tell us what their experience is. So we want to avoid shutting that down in any way. We want to allow that to happen. We want to provide space before we respond, before we act. What we then want to do is assess. After we've listened to our teenager, after we have listened to what they are thinking, we want to assess how serious these thoughts are. And what we mean by that is we're thinking of whether they have a plan, means, or if they've made previous attempts. So a plan is if your teenager can tell you, yes, I am thinking of dying this way. I am thinking of taking these pills. I am thinking of getting a gun in the basement and shooting myself. I'm thinking of these things. That is how we know that we have a plan. Even if your teenager says, I have imagined myself doing these things, we clinically consider that to be a plan. The next thing is means. Means, which I know that sounds ridiculous, but when I say means, it refers to what the child or individual would use to complete a suicide. What do they have access to? Do they have access to razor blades, to knives, to pills, things like that? And then attempts, or have there been any previous attempts? You want to ask all three of these things. So you want to look at your child and say, have you considered how you would kill yourself? Have you considered what you would use? Have you tried before? And again, I know that these are hard questions to ask, but they're necessary questions to ask. In the middle of assessing, that is when you can move on to acting. Based off of how severe the situation is, you have plenty of options as parents on how to act. If your child tells you they have an active plan, they have attempted before without you knowing, even if they haven't attempted before, but they do have a plan, if your child cannot tell you that they have anything to live for, if they can't tell you that they can survive, they can stay alive for X amount of days, if they can't do that, that is when we're in what we call a red flag area or a red zone area. We want to get immediate assistance. This could look like a lot of different things. This could look like using one of the phone numbers that was provided tonight. The National Suicide Hotline is a great one. The Georgia Crisis and Access Line is another great one that you can use to have someone come to your home and assist you. Someone else also in the chat earlier threw out the Trevor Project, which is an excellent resource as well, especially for my LGBTQ kids. They have on-site counselors as well available who can respond to crisis. This is if you need someone in that moment to talk to your child and to you. The second thing that I always want to let my parents know is that if you cannot go to sleep that night knowing for certain that your child is safe, that your child is not going to do anything, then that means that we need to move on to the next step, which would be taking your child to an inpatient facility, such as Peachford or Ridgeview, just to name a couple. I know that's a scary consideration, and I hate to have to even suggest it, but it's incredibly necessary. I can't stress enough how important it is to utilize inpatient services when your child is actively suicidal. And again, this is for active suicide, for those children who are engaging in self-harming behaviors, who are wanting to hurt themselves, who are wanting to complete a suicide, and who cannot tell you that they won't. If we are not in a red situation, if we're in more of a yellow situation where, yes, your child is having thoughts of suicide, but they do not have a plan, they haven't considered means, and they definitely have not made an attempt, then we can start transitioning more to what we call our outpatient services. So looking for a counselor in the community who can be able to help your child through these things. Those crisis lines as well are very appropriate for this type of situation as well. This could be a nice introduction for you and your child, just to talk to somebody, just to get a feel of what it is like to actually discuss open suicidality. That can be really important, but it is going to be even more important to be able to get your child access to appropriate services in the community. A great resource that I gave last time and I'm going to give tonight is a website called Psychology Today. You can use Psychology Today in order to find therapists in your area that are under your insurance plans, that work with specific age groups, all of that jazz. And you can find someone specifically catered to you. And again, this would be for what we call a yellow zone situation. Your child does not have means, does not have a plan, and hasn't made future or any attempts. What I want to close out with, because I know that I'm right on time here, is just the importance of communication. That is the number one key to suicide prevention, is communication with your child and with anybody, truthfully. And even though these conversations are incredibly difficult to have, just being able and willing to open that door for your child is going to open a whole realm of possibilities for their healing and for their growth. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Well, that's a lot to take in. And I hope that that is something that parents can hold on to. Those 4 A's of ask and allow, avoid, assess, and act are definitely some things that I know that I personally want to hold on to as well too. So thank you again, Sarah. And folks, anybody who may have questions or comments, if you'll put them either the chat room or the Q&A area, we will make sure we get to them after the next presenter. Our next speaker is someone that many of you already know. Dr. Kimberly Jones is the district lead counselor for the City Schools of Decatur. And as a 21-year veteran educator, Dr. Jones taught middle school and high school science and has been a professional school counselor for the past 16 years. She is currently the lead counselor for the City Schools of Decatur and the head counselor for Decatur High School. She is also navigating this new pandemic world with her 7th grader who's at Renfro and a recent high school graduate who I think may be driving her around this evening. She has been an active supporter of the Decatur Parents Network since its inception, and we welcome her tonight. Thank you, Dr. Jones, for joining us.
Thank you so much. At this point, Emily is back in her dorm, and I am actually in a parking lot at an apartment complex in right off campus in Kennesaw. So I didn't want to continue driving and do anything distracted wise or dangerous. So I've stopped, but I'm on my hotspot, so I'm going to cut my screen off while I present.
So Dr. Jones, just tell Tiffany what you want her to do or what you do, either one.
I am about to share a tab. Okay, I thought it was. Do you see a presentation at this point?
I do.
Yay.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so as Terry said, I am giving information about prevention, intervention, and I added an extra little piece about postvention. So I will go ahead and get started for the sake of time. So I'm concentrating on prevention, intervention, and postvention, specifically to when there is a suicide risk during school hours. So the first thing is, of course, our prevention piece. And I wanted to make sure we covered this because a lot of times people don't know that we are doing suicide prevention on a regular basis. So as a part of our comprehensive counseling program with our ASCA model, there are specific content standards that we have to cover related to helping students with decreasing stress and anxiety, normalizing discussions about mental health, self-advocacy skills, and things of that nature. So we make sure in our program that we have embedded in social emotional learning components embedded in our programming, working with the teachers to make this regular conversation in their content classes. Say, for instance, in stats classes, talking about different statistics related to suicide or mental health, or psychology classes, talking about the topics there. We are also covering this information very specifically in our advisement program as well. We are embedding the C learning lessons and some of the tenets that we learned from last year in advisement, and teachers are using these when they're doing their opening circles and things in classes as well, using mindfulness, resourcing, grounding, from C learning, the community component of building a kind and compassionate community. The PBIS matrix also takes these things into account. So your students are really getting lots of messages related to prevention and coping and recognizing how they feel, and when they're not in what we called in C learning their okay zone, when they're low, who to contact, when they're high, who to contact, and recognizing that okay and when I'm not okay. So intervention comes in when we are made aware that there is some suicide ideation, or there has been some action towards that. So when our intervention comes into play, that comes specifically from counselors, psychologists, our social workers, the therapists. We have multiple individuals that have been trained with the applied suicide intervention skills training, which we call ASSIST, that uses a PAL model which assists life. So I'll go into a bit more detail about that later. The Decatur Student Center is one of our places where we do intervention. We also refer for therapeutic support regardless of your insurance status, because we do have 2 therapists that are CSD employees, and a part of our intervention that kind of reaches over in the postvention is our Suicide to Hope program. And each of these bullet points I'll go into a bit more detail. So for the counseling department, faculty and staff have been trained to report any concerns to the counselors. So teachers will report if oftentimes something comes out in a student writing sample, or teachers will notice a change in a student's affect. A student may verbally say something that raises a flag to a teacher. Sometimes a teacher or a staff member, administrator, may see something in a social media post that alarms them, and they will contact a counselor. We also get information from you, from parents, from friends, from clergy, community members. We always want to encourage you, if you feel like something is off, if you feel like something is awry, if someone has explicitly said something about suicide, not wanting to live anymore, why should I live, who cares if I die, any of these type of things, it is not overstepping, it is not inappropriate for you to contact a counselor. If I'm your student's counselor and you can't remember my email address, but you remember someone else's, email any of the counselors, they will get in touch. We've had families where, it's an elementary student, but they know that there's a high school kid, so they email the elementary school counselor, and then that counselor gets in touch with me. That is where we start. And so what the counselors do, we first make sure that students understand what is confidential and what we have to report. And that if there is threats of harm to self or others, or someone has hurt them, those are things that we cannot keep to ourselves, and we have to let other folks know. So we make that understood at the beginning. If it's ideation, suicide ideation, then our counselors immediately jump into the assist protocol, which, as the first speaker spoke about, does teach us to explicitly ask, are you considering suicide or killing yourself? We, in our protocol, cannot beat around the bush and use colloquialisms. We want to make sure that the student understands what we're asking, and we want to ask very clearly so that the answer they give us, there's no guessing on what they meant. And with that, we're able to support them in the most appropriate manner. That's with ideation. Now, if it is a student on campus who has made an attempt, we are immediately calling emergency services because we want to make sure that their physical, medical needs are taken care of. And then we circle back around to making sure they get the mental health support they need. When this happens, we do contact the parents or guardians. When this happens, we do strongly suggest getting a mental health evaluation. We cannot force you to, but it is strongly suggested in order to make sure that we're able to support the student in the best way possible. And then what we do is, if the student has to be out of school for a while, because in these situations, the mental health trumps anything academic. We have lots of programs and support pieces to help a student get back on track academically. But if a student is not able to avail themselves to academic content because of mental health challenges, we are not going to add additional stress and anxiety of academics. We want them to get the mental health support they need. So when they return and are ready to attend school, we then have a re-entry meeting where we get together, we look at the discharge information, if they went to any sort of facility, to be able to put in place a plan to make sure that they are safe when they return to the building. A bit more detail without going into everything about the ASSIST program. It is a research-based intervention that we use to facilitate helping a person go from feeling like suicide is their only choice to diving into why they came to that, looking at what other options may be, and getting them to agree to stay safe for now while we explore some of those options. So ASSIST is about having a conversation that helps the person that is having suicide ideation find something to say, you know what? I don't want to die right now. Let's dig into this thing that we just surfaced. And I'm willing to put the pause button on this until we can figure something out. The Decatur Student Center is used for both intervention and postvention. Everything that I just told you that the professional school counselors do, our counseling, community counseling interns, our therapists, and our student center counselor, they are trained and able to do those exact things. So in this presentation that will be shared with you, I've given you some links specific to the Student Center, whose purpose is to provide wraparound services beyond the scope of the school counseling program. So you have links here for who's in the center that can help your students, the services provided, referrals by grade band, because currently the 2 active centers are located in Decatur High School and Renfro Middle School, but the Decatur Student Center is a K-12 initiative. It is a K-12 program, and our therapists are visiting students K-12 and have caseloads of students K-12. So we're making sure that the students is providing support to the whole district. We've got a list of resources and community partnerships. And then this last statement, I guess I kind of jumped the gun when I was talking about getting the students reintegrated after an incident. But we do like to make sure that you understand that while we know we are in a school, we want their mental health to come first, especially in situations like this. For postvention, we have multiple referral services, referral opportunities, whether it's to continue some individual or group therapy with our district therapists. We have memorandums of understanding with some local therapists in the Decatur area. As Sarah said, you see, we are of the same mind here. I've got the link there for the Psychology Today therapist search. You can look based on specific mental health needs, which insurance you have. Some people want a therapist with a particular race, gender, religious underpinning. You can click on all of those items and get a list of therapists that meet your specific needs to support your student. And so the last piece, Suicide to Hope, we currently have a few individuals that are trained, but the main thing with Suicide to Hope is once we've gotten the individual to stay safe for now, this helps them look at building goals towards sustaining life. So with Assist and PAL, we get them to say, you know what, I won't do this today. I won't do this now. And with Suicide to Hope, we help to build that hope that there is consistently something for me to live for. So our plan is to get a larger number of individuals trained in the Suicide to Hope protocol as well, with hopes that we don't have to use it, but we want to make sure that individuals are trained to use the protocol if it becomes necessary. And my last slide actually looks similar to the first thing that you saw. We want to make sure that you have access to these numbers. And at the bottom, that is actually a chat that the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline has. So you can call the number and talk, or click the link to chat. And that concludes my presentation from the car in the parking lot.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jones. It helps me certainly better understand where we are with this and what's happening in the community. And I just have to say, can you put yourself back on now? Are you able to do that? She can quit screen sharing. There she comes. I see her coming. Maybe. I want to just reinforce something that that Dr. Jones had said that I have personally experienced with her, and she's probably going to get mad at me for saying this, but love you, Dr. Jones. You are so right about using your school counselors as resources. At the Parent Network, we have had many instances, not necessarily suicide related, but just concerned about kids that we didn't know what to do because that's not in everyone's wheelhouse. And Dr. Jones and the other staff have always been on backup for us to call and to use them as a resource. And I know they're swamped right now, as every therapist in the world is, but reach out and let them know. And if it's urgent, that's a totally different story. We did have one comment that came up. First off, Dr. Jones, how does someone get trained for the Suicide for Hope program? Is that something that's open to the public?
So we are going to do that in much the way we're doing Assist. We currently have a calendar for folks to get trained on Assist. And when we go through the approval channels and everything to start doing Suicide to Hope, we'll do the same thing. We'll start with faculty and staff and then move to some community trainings as well. Because right now we're doing that with Assist later in the winter, maybe. I know right now we're planning in October, we've got some trainings for staff across the district, and then later on moving into some community offerings. And we'll do the same thing with Suicide to Hope.
So those will be open to the general public on a first come, first serve.
That is our goal.
Okay, hear you. This sounds great. Thank you. Another question that came up, and Sarah, I may throw this one at you to start with. The question was, how much of a risk factor for an indicator for kids who have a history with cutting, burning, or other kinds of self-harm?
Absolutely, and that's a fantastic question. So not all self-harm, and very frequently, most self-harm is not related to suicidality. So many children will engage in self-harm without having suicidal thoughts. However, always, every single time, without exception, if you know that your child is engaging in self-harming behaviors, you must ask if they are also having suicidal thoughts. Just like what Dr. Jones had spoken about, what I talked about earlier, going through those questions, being very blunt, being very direct. That is something that's standard for us clinicians. Anytime we have a minor or anybody, even an adult, who is engaging in self-harming behaviors, the first question that we will ask is, are you also having suicidal thoughts as well? And that will be a great way to open that door. So for that parent, for other parents who are wondering the same thing, if you are aware that your child is self-harming, definitely ask those questions, because even though it may not be related to suicide, still self-harming behaviors are serious within themselves, even if they're not suicide related, and also need clinical attention.
Okay. Does anyone else have comments? You can even put them in the question and answer or the chat. While we're waiting on that, I did want to just throw this back out to Dr. Jones to read, to just say, okay, I saw something on my child's phone. It's not my child, but I know they're in the city schools of Decatur. What do we do?
It is perfectly okay to send, you can send that picture to a counselor. You can set up a meeting with a counselor if you're uncomfortable with that and say, this is the picture. I think this is a student. There is no, I'm coming to speak to you, student, because mama such and such told me you so and so. It's never going to be that type of thing. It's going to be a well check. I'm calling you in because I have some information, or I'm concerned about you. Let's have a talk. And we'll have a conversation with the student. But never feel any angst about should I or shouldn't I, because I never want you to be in the position of, I could have said something and I didn't. That's a hard place to sit. And if you report something, there is that piece of confidentiality will stay. Like, we're not telling folks who told. We're checking in with students to make sure they're safe. And when that has happened in the past, I will tell you that I have not had an incident where the student was not happy that we came and talked to them. Every time the student ends up being thankful, even if they come in a little salty. Why are you calling me in? When we get into what's really going on and they see that we are able to support them with whatever that root issue was that had them in that place, they appreciate the support.
And thank you for that, Dr. Jones. And also, folks, that's another reason to join the parent network, is to make sure the more parents you have connections with, the easier it is to deal with these things. We have a comment from a parent. It can help to warn kids that they may be put on hold when calling a suicide hotline, sometimes for a long time, especially given staff shortages. Our daughter waited for more than 20 minutes, time that she spent counting out the pills she was going to take. She eventually hung up without speaking to anyone. Thank you so much, Angela, for bringing that up. You know, sometimes you just have to get them in the car and take them somewhere. And that's kind of how I'm going to leave that. Sarah, any comments on that?
Yeah, no, it is absolutely incredibly unfortunate how many times I've heard long wait times on, especially for the suicide hotline. Georgia Crisis and Access Line is a little bit better about that, but they're also very understaffed as well. The Trevor Project can be another great resource, like we talked about before. But like Terry said, if you are aware that your child is having these thoughts, and even if we are not in crisis mode, even if we're in like that yellow mode, like I was talking about before, go ahead and get in the car, go to Ridgeview, go to Peachford. They're public institutions. They will allow you to get a bed as long as one is available, and there usually is one when you walk into the door after an intake session. So that is number one. If you cannot get any other immediate care and it is that distressing, go 100% to the hospital. And last case scenario, go to the ER. Because you will be waiting a long time in the ER for suicidal ideation. You will be, and it's awful. But you will be in the waiting room, away from access to your means, away from triggers, and that is more important.
Thank you guys so much for bringing this up. And please just know, folks, that that these two folks are also, if Sarah, if you want to make sure that your contact information is also in the chat room, that you can reach out to these two wonderful professionals in our community. I know that Tiffany is behind the scenes saying that she was able to at least, were you going to play at least the reach out video, Tiffany?
I know what it feels like to seem so cold, one without the other, when you're lost in that hole. Don't think you're all alone, you have somewhere to go. This ain't a one-person show. Oh, let someone out there lend you a hand. Don't go through this alone. Reach out, give someone a chance to help, even when you're falling down, down, down. Your whole life will turn around. Reach out to somebody, cry out to somebody. Life is in the palm of their hands. Reach out, give someone a chance to help, even when you're falling down, down, down. Your whole life will turn around. Reach out to somebody, cry out to somebody. Life is in the palm of their hands. Reach out to them. Reach out to them. Reach out to them.
On that hopeful note, folks, I want to thank everyone for attending tonight, and thank you so much to our speakers as well. Folks, our next event is coming up on September the 29th, and it's the Science of Addiction Recovery. And as you can see, all of these things are so intertwined with mental health and substance misuse and suicide. So please join us. We want to thank everyone again for being with us and joining us tonight. And I see that someone is texting me on my phone. I don't know if I need to pay attention to this, but I want to thank all of you for being here and thank our wonderful presenters as well. Please take our survey and join us at our next meeting. And don't forget, ask and advise and tell. Good night, everyone.